Welcome to Tales of Warriors channel. Today, we will discover the fascinating world of clandestine operations of the Israeli intelligence service, the Mossad. This is a compelling stories collection, unveils the secret endeavors of Israel's renowned intelligence agency, delving into thrilling accounts of daring missions, strategic triumphs, and the remarkable individuals behind them. Join us on a journey through Mossad's daring covert operations. In this video, we will discover the last 3 operations of Mossad in this series. This video is suitable for those who have free time, are ready for bed, driving, or need something as background while studying, cleaning, or relaxing. Episode 19. Love and Death in the Afternoon. On February 12, 2008, several men surreptitiously fanned out around an apartment building in an exclusive Damascus neighborhood. In the late afternoon, they saw a silver Mitsubishi Pajero SUV parked by the building. A man in a black suit, with a smartly trimmed beard, got out of the vehicle and entered the house. He was not accompanied by bodyguards. The agents posted on the street whispered in their miniature transmitters that the man had arrived in Damascus and he was on his way to the apartment. They knew that the man in black was about to meet his secret lover, Nihad Haidar, a Syrian woman, who was waiting for him in the apartment. The man was carrying a present for gorgeous Nihad, who celebrated her 30th birthday that week. The lovers spent a few hours in the luxurious apartment that was left at their disposal by Rami Mughniyeh, a successful businessman and the cousin of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. Shortly before 10 p.m., the man in black left the building and got into the silver Pajero. He was on his way to a meeting in a discreet safe house, in the Kafr Susa neighborhood, where he met with Iranian, Syrian, and Palestinian envoys. According to the London Sunday Express, the agents following him checked an updated photo of the man on the screens of their mobile phones to make sure there would be no identification mistake. They kept open lines of transmission and reported every move of the mark to the Mossad command post. When he left the building, where he had spent a few hours with Nihad, the agents had a good opportunity to check his face against the photos on their screens. They confirmed the identification to their colleagues in Damascus and to headquarters in Tel Aviv. An overwhelming tension swept the Mossad. The department heads gathered in Mayor Dagon's office, where all the necessary equipment was set up for monitoring the operation in real time. The man started the silver Pajero. "He's on his way," whispered one of the agents into his miniature mic. The man in the silver Pajero was Imad Mughniyeh, who had left a bloody trail, years long, behind him. November 15, 2001. Following the attack on the Twin Towers, the FBI publishes a large poster containing the list of the most wanted terrorists in the world. The poster is stamped with the logos of the FBI, the State Department, and the Department of Justice. The list shows 22 names and 22 pictures. The first name is the most dangerous of them all. The award for his capture is $5 million. Until the attack on the Twin Towers, he had been considered as responsible for the deaths of more Americans than any other living terrorist. Imad Mughniyeh. April 18, 1983, bombing of the American embassy in Beirut, Lebanon, 63 dead. October 23, 1983, bombing of the U.S. Marines headquarters in Beirut, 241 dead. October 23, 1983, same day, bombing of the French paratrooper headquarters in Beirut, 58 dead. And the abduction and murder of CIA official William Buckley, several attacks on the American embassy in Kuwait, hijacking of a TWA airliner and 2 planes of the Kuwait airline, the murder of Colonel W. R. Higgins of the UN Observer Force in South Lebanon, massacre of 20 American soldiers in Saudi Arabia. When the above list is sent to Israel, the Mossad adds its own data. November 4, 1983, bombing of the IDF headquarters in Tyre, Lebanon, 60 dead. March 10, 1985, attack on an IDF convoy by Matullah, on the Israeli-Lebanese border, 8 dead. March 17, 1992, bombing of the Israeli embassy in Argentina, 29 dead. July 18, 1994, bombing of the Jewish Community Center in Buenos Aires, 86 dead. And the abduction and murder of 3 Israeli soldiers at the Har Dov border sector, the abduction of Israeli businessman Elhanan Tannenbaum, a bombing near kibbutz Matsuba, and the most destructive of them all, the abduction and murder of the soldiers Regev and Goldwasser on the Israeli-Lebanese border, which triggered the Second Lebanon War. Imad Mughniyeh, the arch-terrorist behind all those crimes, was a ghost who moved constantly between the Middle East capitals. He evaded photographers and refused to be interviewed. The Western secret services knew a lot about his activities, but almost nothing about his outward appearance, his habits, and his hideouts. They knew he was born in 1962, in a South Lebanon village. According to the fragmentary reports, his parents were devoted Shiites, while in his teens, he had moved to Beirut and grown up in a poor neighborhood mostly populated by Palestinians, supporters of the PLO. He had dropped out of high school and joined the Fatah, the terrorist branch of the PLO. Later he had become the bodyguard of Abu Ayyad, Arafat's deputy, and became a member of 417, the special security unit of the Fatah organization that was formed in the mid-70s and commanded by Ali Hassan Salameh, the Red Prince, see Chapter 12. But in 1982, Israel launched the Lebanon War, called Operation Peace for Galilee, invaded Lebanon, and crushed the PLO. Its surviving members, headed by Yasser Arafat, were exiled to Tunisia. Mughniyeh, though, decided to stay behind and join the first group of Hezbollah founders. The Hezbollah, literally, the Party of God, was a Shiite terrorist organization created in 1982 in response to the Israeli invasion of Lebanon. Inspired by the Ayatollah Khomeini, trained and supplied by the Iranian Revolutionary Guards, the Hezbollah became Israel's vile enemy, defining its main goal as Israel's final departure from Lebanon as a prelude to its final obliteration. From the first day of its existence, Hezbollah engaged in violent acts of terrorism against Israel. And Mughniyeh was an ideal recruit for the nascent group. As a real man of shadows, he chose to operate in secret and refrained from appearing in public. The reports about him became fragmentary and often contradictory. One source described him as the bodyguard of Sheikh Fadlallah, the Hezbollah spiritual leader, while another claimed he had become the operations chief of the organization, the brain behind Hezbollah's most risky actions, which ended in bloodbaths. Unlike the present Hezbollah leader, the Sheikh Nasrallah, Mughniyeh never appeared on television and never made hateful speeches, but in reality he was far more dangerous than the loquacious sheikh. He soon rose to the position of the most efficient and most elusive terrorist in the world, like Carlos in his time, and like his colleague and great admirer Osama bin Laden. Mughniyeh was a cruel and creative terrorist. He emerged suddenly, when he planned and commanded several mass massacres in Lebanon, at the end of Operation Peace for Galilee. He was only 21 years old on this day in October 1983, when he sent explosive-laden trucks, driven by suicide bombers, to the compounds of the American Marines and the French paratroopers in Beirut. A few days later, he repeated the same scenario against the IDF headquarters in Tyre. At 22, he led a group of terrorists on an attack against the fortified American embassy in Kuwait and afterward hijacked his first plane there. After each of his operations, he vanished into thin air. At 23, Mughniyeh hijacked a TWA plane on its way from Athens to Rome and forced its pilot to land in Beirut airport. During the hijacking, he murdered Navy diver Robert Dean Stetham and threw his body out the cockpit door. Mughniyeh escaped after the hijacking operation that lasted 17 days, but this time he left behind a memento, his fingerprint in the aircraft restroom. Almost nothing was known about his private life, except for his marriage to his cousin, who gave him a son and a daughter. At a very early age, he knew he was in the crosshairs of several Western secret services, and tried to conceal his identity. He went through a rudimentary plastic surgery in Libya, grew a beard, and stayed out of the limelight. Only a single confirmed photo of Mughniyeh, fat, bearded, wearing glasses and a visor cap, made its way to the Western services. His description was flawed as well. The FBI portrayed him as born in Lebanon, speaking Arabic, brown hair and beard, height 5 feet 8 inches, 170 centimeters, weight 120 pounds, about 60 kilograms. It is hard to imagine how Mughniyeh's generous dimensions managed to shrink into a 120-pound model body. But the description only reconfirmed that Mughniyeh protected himself well and succeeded in misleading all his enemies. After all the attacks, bombings, and hijackings he carried out, he became an admired hero of the Hezbollah. He was lauded for his sophistication, his bravery, and his operational talents that made the Hezbollah's military arm feared by the world's intelligence services. As his power increased, he became a major target for assassination by Israel and the West. Mughniyeh realized this, and became a paranoid who lived a life of eternal flight, suspected everybody, including his closest confidants, changed his bodyguards very often, and slept every night in another place. His trips between Beirut, Damascus, and Tehran took place under a thick veil of secrecy. According to the profile prepared by Israel and other secret services, Mughniyeh was a loner, very charismatic, very impulsive, and very knowledgeable about the newest electronic instruments and gadgets. He had an uncanny capacity for changing identities and appearances, which enabled him to fool his enemies. Israeli secret agents used to call him the terrorist with 9 lives. Amman officer David Barkai, a former major in the Secret Intelligence Unit 504 that assembled the profile file on Mughniyeh, said in an interview to the British Sunday Times, "We tried to knock him down several times in the late 1980s. We accumulated intelligence on him, but the closer we got, the less information we gleaned. No weak points, no women, money, drugs, nothing." The hunt for Mughniyeh lasted for many years. In 1988, he was almost captured by the French authorities when his plane made a stopover in Paris. The CIA had supplied the French with information about Mughniyeh, including his photograph and some details about the false passport he was using. But the French feared that his arrest might cause the murder of the French hostages that were held in Lebanon at that time, so they chose to ignore his presence and let him go away. The American services tried to capture him in Europe in 1986 and in Saudi Arabia in 1995. But he disappeared, as always. In those years, Mughniyeh was deeply involved in planning and executing attacks on Israelis and Jews in Argentina. In 1992, he organized the bombing of the Israeli embassy in Buenos Aires by a truck stuffed with explosives, driven by a suicide bomber. 29 people were killed. Some of the heads of the Mossad saw in the operation an act of revenge for the killing of Hezbollah's leader Sheikh Abbas al-Mabhouh in a helicopter attack in South Lebanon. 2 years later, another bombing shook Buenos Aires, this time at the Jewish Community Center, leaving 86 dead. Once again, some experts thought Hezbollah was avenging the abduction by Israel of one of its leaders, Mustafa Durrani, in Lebanon. Intelligence crews from the United States and Israel, who flew to Buenos Aires to investigate the 2 bombings, concluded that they were connected. The modus operandi was identical, loading a truck with explosives and sending it to its target with a suicide bomber behind the wheel. Mughniyeh had used exactly the same method in Beirut and in Tyre at the outset of his career. The investigators established that the Iranian secret services and their local collaborators were involved in the bombings as well. At least one of the trucks, the one that had served for the embassy bombing, had been sold to the terrorists by a Buenos Aires Shiite car dealer, Carlos Alberto Taladin. The trail clearly led to Imad Mughniyeh. In those years, Mughniyeh spent long stretches of time in Iran. After the assassination of Sheikh al-Mabhouh, he feared that Israel would try to kill him, too. In Tehran, he created an operational team, composed of Hezbollah fighters and Iranian intelligence officers. His partners in setting up that unit were the commander-in-chief of the Revolutionary Guards Mohsen Razi, and the Minister of Intelligence Ali Falahian. Apparently, that unit carried out the 2 deadly attacks in Buenos Aires. These attacks had one result: Mughniyeh became Israel's most wanted man. By his acts, he sentenced himself to death. But long years would pass by before his death sentence would be carried out. In December 1994, Mughniyeh was seen in Beirut. Shortly after, he escaped an assassination attempt by a booby-trapped car in a southern neighborhood. The Lebanese police quickly published its findings. An explosive charge had been placed underneath a car parked near the mosque where Sheikh Fadlallah read his sermon. The explosion destroyed the store of Fuad Mughniyeh, Imad's brother, and his body was found in the rubble. But Imad, who was supposed to be there, changed his mind at the last moment, decided not to come, and survived. His 9 lives saved him again. A few weeks after the bombing, the security services, acting jointly with the Hezbollah, arrested several civilians suspected of being involved in the attack, as Mossad collaborators. The main suspect was a man named Ahmed Halek. According to the official police statement, Halek and his wife had parked their car close to Fuad Mughniyeh's store. Halek entered the store to make sure that Fuad was there, shook his hand, returned to the car, and activated the bomb. The Lebanese newspaper As-Safir, quoting reliable sources, said that Halek had participated in a meeting with a senior Mossad official in Cyprus. The Mossad officer had instructed him how to use the bomb and paid him about $100,000. Halek was subsequently executed. This time Mughniyeh escaped, but the Mossad agents did not give up. They painstakingly collected every small detail they could find, compiled reports from foreign intelligence services, and studied Mughniyeh's personal methods. In 2002, the Mossad received another report about Mughniyeh, linking him to the shipping of 50 tons of weapons to Palestinian terrorists. But then he vanished again, although rumors had it that he had become the commander-in-chief of the Hezbollah and the likely successor of Sheikh Nasrallah. His main connection was with Iranian intelligence, and he was said to act jointly with the Al-Quds, the Arab name of Jerusalem, brigades, charged with the cooperation with Shiite communities throughout the world and with Iranian-controlled terrorist organizations. Mughniyeh's high position made it imperative for him to beef up his security measures. Persistent rumors affirmed that he once again had changed his outward appearance, possibly by another plastic surgery. According to European sources, at the end of the Second Lebanon War, the Mossad recruited quite a few Palestinians living in Lebanon, those strongly opposed to the Hezbollah. One of them had a cousin in Mughniyeh's village. She told the newly recruited agent that Mughniyeh had traveled to Europe and returned to Lebanon with a totally different face. The Mossad now had a new challenge: spying in plastic surgery clinics throughout Europe. The unexpected breakthrough occurred in Berlin. According to the British writer Gordon Thomas, the Mossad resident agent in Berlin, Reuven, met a German informer who maintained discreet connections with people in the former East Berlin. The informer reported that Imad Mughniyeh had recently gone through several plastic surgeries that completely changed his facial features. The treatment had taken place in a clinic that in the past had belonged to the Stasi, the former East German Secret Service. The Stasi had used the clinic for remodeling the faces of agents and terrorists sent on covert missions to the West. After a tough negotiation, Reuven agreed to pay his German collaborator a substantial fee, and received from him a file containing 34 updated photos of Mughniyeh. The analysis of the photos by Meir Dagon's experts showed that Mughniyeh had undergone jaw surgeries. The lower jaws had been cut, and bone taken from him had been grafted in them in order to achieve a more narrow chin line, which made him look skinny and emaciated. Several front teeth had been replaced by artificial teeth of a different shape. The eyes, too, had been treated by a tightening of the skin around them. The treatment was completed by dyeing his hair gray and replacing his eyeglasses with contact lenses. Mughniyeh bore no resemblance to the original anymore, and the old pictures collected by Western services since the 80s had become irrelevant. According to foreign sources, the Mossad now started to plan Mughniyeh's killing. Meir Dagon summoned his best people, including the head of Caesarea, the commander of the Kaidan team, and several other senior officers dealing with the Mughniyeh file. It soon became clear that there was no way to hit Mughniyeh in a non-Muslim country. He very rarely traveled to the west, and felt safe only in Iran and Syria. The Israelis knew any action on their territory would mean great risks. True, Israel had operated in Arab countries in the past and carried out coups in Beirut during its Operation Wrath of God. Its commandos had even gone as far as Tunis, where they allegedly killed the terrorist leader Abu Jihad. But Tehran and Damascus were more suspicious, more heavily armed and dangerous than Beirut or Tunis. On the other hand, Mayor Dagon knew the tremendous impact a successful operation would have. The killing of the most lethal terrorist leader in Damascus would prove that nobody can escape the long arm of the Mossad. The refuge and fortress of Israel's enemies would spread confusion, fear, and insecurity among the rest of the terrorist leaders. According to the London Independent Daily, the plan that emerged from the discussions at Mossad headquarters was based on the probability of Mughniyeh coming to Damascus on February 12, 2008. On that day, he was supposed to meet Iranian and Syrian officials who were to participate in the celebration of the anniversary of the Iranian Revolution. After the possibilities had been studied, it was decided that the operation would be carried out by placing a rigged vehicle directly beside Mughniyeh's car. The Mossad now plunged into frantic activity to get detailed intelligence from all its sources, including foreign services. Would Mughniyeh indeed come to Damascus? And if he did, what identity would he choose? In what car would he come? Where would he stay? Who would accompany him? At what time would he arrive at the planned meeting with the Syrian and Iranian representatives? Would the Syrian authorities be informed of his arrival? Would the Hezbollah leaders know about his planned trip? The report that tipped the scales in favor of the Assassination project came from a very reliable source. It confirmed Mughniyeh's intention to travel to Damascus. That information was corroborated, according to the Lebanese El Balad newspaper, by agents who planted tracking devices in the cars of Mughniyeh and the Hezbollah leaders. The well-oiled machine of Caesarea came in at this point. By labyrinthine routes, the various Kaidan teams arrived in Damascus. A special team smuggled the explosives into the Syrian capital. At the last moment, crucial information was reported by a veteran Mossad informer. Whenever he came to Damascus, the report stated, Mughniyeh would meet his mistress. For the first time, the Mossad spymasters learned that Mughniyeh was having a secret affair. The pretty woman, Nihad Haidar, expected Mughniyeh in a discreet apartment in the city. Nihad knew the dates of Mughniyeh's arrival in Damascus in advance, from Beirut or from Tehran. He used to visit their love nest by himself, dismissing his bodyguards and his driver beforehand. Urgent messages alerted the watchers who were already in place. Will Mughniyeh visit his lover this time as well? Does the owner of the apartment know that he is coming? On the eve of the operation, the members of the hit team arrived in Damascus. They flew to the Syrian capital from various European cities. According to The Independent, the team numbered 3 agents. One came from Paris on an Air France flight, the second took off from Milan with Alitalia, and the third used a short flight from Amman with Royal Jordanian. The 3 agents' false papers indicated that they were businessmen, 2 of them in the car trade and the third a travel agent. They declared on arrival that they had come to spend a short vacation in Syria, and passed through immigration without any problems. They drove to the city separately and got together only after making sure that they were not followed. They later met with some auxiliaries, who had arrived from Beirut, and were taken to a concealed garage, where a rented car was waiting and, beside it, a load of explosives that included plastic charges and tiny metal balls. The 3 hit men locked themselves in the garage, prepared the explosive charge, and placed it in the rented car. The charge was not placed, as certain newspapers would later claim, in the headrest of Mughniyeh's car, but in the radio compartment of the rented vehicle. Another team of Mossad watchers waited for Mughniyeh's arrival from Beirut. Their role was to stick to him, hang close to the apartment building where he would meet his mistress, and report about his departure. They had to follow him and make sure he arrived at the meeting in Kfar Sousa. Among the people he was to meet there were the new Iranian ambassador to Damascus and the most secretive man in Syria, General Mohammed Suleiman. Suleiman was, among others, in charge of transferring arms from Iran and Syria to the Hezbollah, and he maintained close relations with Imad Mughniyeh. Suleiman, who had been involved in the secret Syrian nuclear project, had only 6 months to live. He would be mysteriously assassinated on August 2nd, during a dinner with friends at his beach house. See Chapter 18. That same evening, the Iranian embassy had scheduled a celebration of the anniversary of the revolution at the Iranian Cultural Center at Kfar Sousa, quite close to the safe house where Mughniyeh was to meet the Iranian and Syrian officials. He decided, though, not to participate in the festivities, only to confer with his partners and leave Damascus. On February 12, in the morning, the Mossad teams were in place. The watchers took position around the apartment building, Mughniyeh's first destination. In the late afternoon, they reported that Mughniyeh had arrived in Nihad's apartment, and in the evening they informed their superiors that he had set out on his way to his second destination. They hoped it would be his last. The Pajero crossed Damascus and arrived in Kfar Sousa. The watchers followed Mughniyeh, continuously reporting his moves. The rigged car had been brought to the area where Mughniyeh would park. The activation signal was going to be given from a great distance by means of electronic equipment. The agents who had rigged the car had left the place long ago and were on their way to the airport. The electronic sensors followed the silver SUV. It stopped. An auxiliary parked the rigged car close to the silver Pajero. Shortly before 10 p.m., a thunderous explosion shook the Kfar Sousa neighborhood, not far from an Iranian school, empty at this hour, and by a public park. Exactly at the moment when Mughniyeh got out of his SUV, the car beside him exploded. Mughniyeh was dead. His death shook the Hezbollah to the core. It was a terrible blow to the Syrian government, only a few months after its secret nuclear reactor had been pulverized. 6 months after Mughniyeh's death, in November 2008, the Lebanese authorities announced the discovery of a spy ring working for the Mossad. One of the people arrested, 50-year-old Ali Jarrah from the Bekaa Valley, had worked for the Mossad for the last 20 years for a monthly salary of $7,000. He was accused of traveling to Syria frequently, on missions for the Mossad. In February 2008, a few days before the operation, he had traveled to Kfar Sousa. The Lebanese services that arrested Jarrah discovered a cache of sophisticated photography equipment, a video camera, and a GPS, expertly concealed in his car. Jarrah broke under interrogation and confessed that his Mossad handlers had instructed him to watch, photograph, and collect information about the neighborhoods Mughniyeh was about to visit, including the love nest where he met with Nihad. Israel denied any connection to the assassination, but the Hezbollah spokesman repeatedly accused the Israeli Zionists of the murder of the jihad hero, who died as a shaheed, martyr. The U.S. State Department spokesman Sean McCormick did not share that view. He described Mughniyeh as a cold-blooded killer, a mass murderer, and a terrorist responsible for ending countless lives. The world, McCormick concluded, is a better place without him. Episode 20. The cameras were rolling. In early January 2010, 2 black Audi A6 cars sailed through the fortified gate of a gray building perched on a hill in North Tel Aviv. The building, called the College, was actually Mossad headquarters. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was welcomed by the Ramsad, Mayor Dagon, when he came out of the second car. A short while earlier, Netanyahu had extended Dagon's appointment by another year. Dagon and the Mossad heads felt upbeat and confident after the success of their last operations, the destruction of the Syrian reactor, the killings of Mughniyeh and Suleiman. What was urgent now was to sever another link between Iran and the terrorists, and that link had a name, al-Mabhouh. According to the journalist Ronan Bergman, the Mossad code name for getting al-Mabhouh was plasma screen. In the briefing room, Dagon and his senior aides presented their plan for the killing of Mahmoud Abdul Rauf al-Mabhouh, a leader of Hamas and the linchpin in the system of smuggling weapons from Iran via Sudan, Egypt, and the Sinai Peninsula into the Gaza Strip. Al-Mabhouh, Dagon's men said, would be killed in Dubai, one of the United Arab Emirates on the Persian Gulf. Netanyahu approved the execution of plasma screen, and the preparation started right away. The plan was to kill al-Mabhouh in a hotel room in Dubai. The London Sunday Times reported that the members of the Mossad hit team rehearsed the killing in a Tel Aviv hotel without notifying hotel management. Mahmoud al-Mabhouh, aka Abu Abed, was born in 1960 in the Jabalia refugee camp, in the north of the Gaza Strip. In the late 70s, he joined the Muslim Brotherhood and, as a fervent Muslim, took part in sabotaging Arab cafes where gambling was practiced. In 1986, he was arrested by the Israeli army for possession of an AK-47 assault rifle, but was released after less than a year and joined the Izz ad-Din al-Qassam Brigade, the military arm of Hamas. Al-Mabhouh's commander, Salah Shahada, tasked him and several other Hamas terrorists with a special mission, kidnapping and killing Israeli soldiers. On February 16, 1989, al-Mabhouh and another Hamas member stole a car, dressed as ultra-Orthodox Jews, and offered a lift to a soldier, Avi Sesportas, who was standing at a crossroads, trying to hitch a ride home. As Sesportas entered their car, al-Mabhouh turned back and shot him in the face. The soldier was buried by al-Mabhouh and his acolytes, after they photographed themselves with the body. 3 months after murdering Sesportas, al-Mabhouh and other Hamas members abducted another soldier, Ilan Sadin, at the Riem crossroads and murdered him as well. Later, in an Al Jazeera interview, al-Mabhouh admitted his part in the assassinations and in burying the dead soldiers. After the second murder, al-Mabhouh escaped to Egypt, then to Jordan, and continued his terrorist activities, mostly by smuggling weapons and explosives into Gaza. Back in Cairo, he was arrested by the Egyptians, spent most of 2003 in an Egyptian jail, and later escaped to Syria. He now was labeled a dangerous terrorist, wanted by the police of Israel, Egypt, and Jordan. He was regarded by his superiors as a gifted organizer and climbed the Hamas hierarchy, focusing most of his efforts in smuggling weapons from Iran to the Gaza Strip. Al-Mabhouh realized that he was wanted by the Mossad because of his functions. He also knew that Israel would not forgive and forget the murder of its 2 soldiers. He took strict precautions, changed identities often, and posed as a businessman traveling between Middle East cities for his legitimate dealings. He told a friend that, when staying in a hotel, he used to barricade his room door with armchairs to prevent bad surprises. In a rare interview he gave to the Al Jazeera network, al-Mabhouh appeared with his head covered with a black cloth. "They tried to hit me 3 times, he said, and they almost succeeded. Once in Dubai, once in Lebanon, 6 months ago, and a 3rd time in Syria, 2 months ago, after the assassination of Imad Mughniyeh. That's the price to be paid by all those who fight the Israelis." Al-Mabhouh actually gave the interview against his will. He thought it was an unnecessary risk but had to obey the explicit orders of the Hamas leadership. Some were to assert later that the interview helped the Mossad to find him. Al-Mabhouh had agreed to appear in front of the cameras on one condition, that his face would be completely blurred. After the recording of the interview, the videotape was sent to Gaza for inspection. It turned out that the distorting of his face failed, and he was instructed to record the interview again. The broadcast of the new interview was postponed. It would be aired only after al-Mabhouh's death. Al-Mabhouh asked what happened to the first recording, and was told that the videotape was kept in the Hamas archives. Some believe that this tape made its way into the hands of the agents who were trying to find him. A few weeks after the recording, a senior member of Hamas got a phone call from an Arab who claimed to be connected with a group that specialized in arms smuggling and money laundering. He made weapons-hungry Hamas some offers they could not refuse, and asked to meet al-Mabhouh in Dubai. It was strange that he had chosen Dubai as a meeting place. The bustling city was actually the place where al-Mabhouh was meeting his Iranian counterparts. Perhaps this mysterious phone call was al-Mabhouh's death sentence. And then, an unprecedented episode in the history of the Spook Wars, the elimination of plasma screen was filmed, recorded, and immortalized by closed-circuit security cameras, installed all over Dubai, from the airport counters all the way down to the hotel lobbies, hallways, and elevators. These tapes are a unique document of the unfolding of the operation and its subsequent stages. They allowed hundreds of millions of spectators throughout the world, comfortably sprawled in their armchairs, to follow a secret, deadly operation of a hit team. Monday, January 18, 2010. Several Mossad agents land in Dubai. They are the precursors of a large team of 27 agents that would trickle into Dubai in the next 24 hours. 12 of them would carry British passports, 4 French, 4 Australian, 1 German, and 6 Irish. The agents check into different hotels in the city. Tuesday, January 19, 2010. 12:09 a.m., 2 Mossad agents, balding, 43-year-old Michael Bodenheimer, carrying a German passport, and his friend James Leonard, carrying a British passport, land in Dubai. The two of them, according to the local police, are the advance team of the group charged with killing al-Mabhouh. 12:30 a.m., the operation commander, Kevin Davron, sporting a goatee and spectacles, arrives in Dubai aboard a direct flight from Paris. He is accompanied by his deputy, Gail Folliard, a vivacious redhead. Both are carrying Irish passports. 1:21 a.m., Gail Folliard checks into the exclusive Hotel Jumeirah and gets a room on the 11th floor. When asked by the reception clerk for her home address, she answers without batting an eye, 78, Memir Road, Dublin, Ireland. It would later be established that this address was non-existent. 1:31 a.m., Kevin Davron, the commander, joins his deputy and checks into the Jumeirah. He gets room 3308. 2:29 a.m., Peter Elvinger, the Operation Logistics Coordinator, arrives in Dubai with a French passport. He is slim, bearded, wearing stylish glasses. According to the police, he carries a suspicious case. 2:36 a.m., at the airport, Peter meets another member of the team and they leave together for a hotel in the city. 10:15 a.m., Mahmoud al-Mabhouh departs from Damascus to Dubai, on a direct Emirates airline flight. In Dubai, he is supposed to coordinate with an Iranian envoy the smuggling of another weapons shipment to Gaza. 10:30 a.m., Peter, the operation coordinator, leaves the hotel and meets the hit team at a big shopping center. 10:50 a.m., Kevin and Gail, the commander and his deputy, join the meeting at the shopping center. Kevin is not wearing his glasses, and his small mustache has vanished. 12:18 p.m., the meeting is over, and the team disperses. Kevin returns to the Jumeirah Hotel and checks out. The security cameras show him entering another hotel, where he puts on a wig, eyeglasses, and a false mustache. 2:12 p.m., 2 agents dressed in tennis outfits enter the luxurious al-Bustan Rotana Hotel. They are watchers, waiting for al-Mabhouh, who is supposed to arrive in the next hour. 3:12 p.m., Gail also leaves the Jumeirah Hotel. For the night spent in the hotel, she pays the sum of $400. 3:15 p.m., Mahmoud al-Mabhouh lands in Dubai. At the immigration booth, he shows a false Iraqi passport and declares he is in the textile import business. 3:25 p.m., Gail moves to another hotel, where she changes clothes, makes up her face, and puts on a wig. 3:28 p.m., al-Mabhouh arrives at the al-Bustan Rotana Hotel. At check-in, he asks for a room with sealed windows and no terrace. He is given room 230 on the second floor. He takes the elevator to the second floor, unaware of the two Mossad watchers dressed as tennis players, who ride the elevator with him. 3:30 p.m., the watchers report, by a special transmission device, that al-Mabhouh has entered his room and the room facing his has the number 237. 3:53 p.m., Peter, the coordinator, arrives in al-Mabhouh's hotel and walks into the business center. He calls reception and reserves room 237. 4:03 p.m., a new watchers team relieves the first and waits for al-Mabhouh to leave his room. 4:14 p.m., all the members of the hit team are now in the al-Bustan Radana hotel. 4:23 p.m., al-Mabhouh leaves his room, surveys the lobby to make sure that the place is clean, and leaves the hotel. The watchers follow him. 4:24 p.m., the watchers transmit to the team commander details about the car that has taken al-Mabhouh downtown. 4:27 p.m., Peter, the coordinator, enters the lobby and gives Kevin Davron his case, which probably contains the objects needed for al-Mabhouh's assassination. 4:33 p.m., Peter goes to the reception desk, checks in, and receives the key for room 237, facing al-Mabhouh's room. 4:40 p.m., Peter gives the room key to Kevin, and leaves the hotel for an unknown destination. 4:44 p.m., Kevin enters room 237. He checks the window and the door peephole, by which he would be able to watch al-Mabhouh enter his room. 5:06 p.m., Gail goes into room 237. She and Kevin go over the timetables and keep receiving reports about al-Mabhouh's moves in the city. 5:36 p.m., one of the watchers enters the hotel wearing a visor cap. At a corner of an empty hallway, he replaces the cap with a wig. 6:21 p.m., Gail leaves room 237, carrying the case previously delivered to Kevin by Peter. She goes to the hotel parking lot and gives the case to one of the hit team members. 6:32 p.m., the first detail of the hit team leaves the parking lot and enters the hotel lobby. 6:34 p.m., the second detail of the hit team enters the hotel and settles on the armchairs and sofas in the far corner of the luxurious lobby, as far as possible from the first detail. 6:43 p.m., the first watcher's detail, the agents wearing tennis clothes, leaves the hotel. 7:30 p.m., Peter, the logistics coordinator, leaves Dubai on a flight to Munich, Germany. 8 p.m., a hotel employee who cleaned the second floor leaves the place. The hit team detail tries to enter al-Mabhouh's room. 8:04 p.m., Kevin, who is posted by the elevators, signals to the members of the hit team to get into the room, because an elevator stops at the second floor and a hotel guest gets out of it. The electronic control system registers an attempt to break into room 230, the room of al-Mabhouh. 8:20 p.m., al-Mabhouh returns to the hotel. The watchers inform Kevin that he is walking toward the elevator. 8:27 p.m., al-Mabhouh enters his room. Kevin and Gail are on guard at the second floor corridor, by the elevators. In room 230, the assassination takes place. 8:46 p.m., 4 members of the hit team leave the hotel. 8:47 p.m., Gail and another member of the hit team leave the hotel. 8:51 p.m., Kevin enters al-Mabhouh's room after the killing and places the Do Not Disturb sign on the door handle. 8:52 p.m., the watcher's detail leaves the hotel. 10:30 p.m., Kevin and Gail leave Dubai on a direct flight to Paris. Approximately at the same time, all the team members depart to different destinations. At 10 p.m., al-Mabhouh's wife called his cell phone. The phone rang and went to voicemail. She called over and over again but with no results. A close friend also tried to reach al-Mabhouh, but failed. Text messages sent to al-Mabhouh remained unanswered. Time passed by and there was no sign of life from al-Mabhouh. The distraught wife called several Hamas senior officials, who decided to send the Hamas resident in Dubai to the al-Bustan Radana hotel. The man went to the reception desk and called room 230. There was no answer. After midnight, the hotel employees finally went up to al-Mabhouh's room, unlocked the door, and found his body. A doctor rushed to the room, examined the corpse, and concluded that the cause of death was cardiac arrest. The Hamas published an official statement attributing al-Mabhouh's death to medical reasons. But al-Mabhouh's family rejected the medical diagnosis and insisted that al-Mabhouh had been murdered by the Mossad. His body was sent to the Dubai medical examiner, while a sample of his blood was flown to a laboratory in France. The lab report came back 9 days later. The Hamas now announced that Mossad agents had assassinated al-Mabhouh, first stunning him with an electronic shocker and then suffocating him with a pillow. Simultaneously, the Dubai police announced that no traces of poison were found in al-Mabhouh's blood. Nevertheless, they quickly reached the conclusion that the Mossad had killed al-Mabhouh on their territory. On January 31, 12 days after al-Mabhouh's death, the London Sunday Times published a piece about his poisoning by the Mossad. Its reporters claimed that Israeli hitmen had entered al-Mabhouh's room and injected him with a poison that simulated a heart attack. The agents then photographed all the documents he carried and exited the room, leaving behind the Do Not Disturb sign. On February 28, the deputy chief of the Dubai police informed the press that the French lab had found in al-Mabhouh's blood traces of a strong hydrochloride painkiller, used for anesthesia before surgery. This substance, he said, causes a muscular relaxation followed by a loss of consciousness. He assumed that the killers injected their victim with the anesthetic and then suffocated him so that his death would look natural. The journalist Gordon Thomas published an article in the London Telegraph about the Mossad's license to kill. Thomas asserted that the modus operandi in al-Mabhouh's death was similar to other assassinations carried out by the Mossad in the past. He added that the 11 members of the hit team, 6 of them women, had been chosen out of 48 members of the Kaidan operational unit. Yossi Melman of Haaretz Daily also stressed that the killers' moves, as reflected by the security cameras and other findings, were identical to past Mossad operations: arrival by separate flights from different parts of the world, stays in different hotels, phone calls placed through international operators, clothes that make identification difficult, and an effort to pose as genuine tourists or businessmen trying to mix business with pleasure. But other experts dismissed that theory, saying that these were exactly the methods used by most Western secret services, therefore it was impossible to establish clearly who had carried out the assassination. The German weekly Der Spiegel revealed that the German intelligence agency, the BND, had informed the members of the German parliament that al-Mabhouh had been killed by Mossad agents. Der Spiegel also described how Michael Bodenheimer, born in Israel, had applied in 2009 for a German passport because his parents had been born in Germany. With his new passport, he had flown, on November 8, 2009, from Frankfurt to Dubai and then to Hong Kong, an itinerary identical to his flights before and after the assassination. According to Der Spiegel, 9 other agents had flown to Dubai on the same day in November 2009 from different airports in Europe. That seemed to be a dress rehearsal for the real operation carried out in January 2010. In an interview with the Al Arabiya newspaper, the chief of the Dubai police, Dahi Khalfan Tamim, explained why he was certain that the Mossad had killed al-Mabhouh. First, we have some DNA samples and fingerprints. Second, all of the hit team members carried genuine foreign passports whose details were false, and when it turned out that some of the owners of the passports were from Israel. So what do you think that Peace Now murdered al-Mabhouh? It is the Mossad, 100%. The chief of the Dubai police soon became a media star, spending hours in front of the world televisions, giving interviews to anyone who was ready to listen. He became the favorite of the television reporters, mostly thanks to Dubai's security cameras. He showed to the press a video film, actually assembled from the tapes of security cameras spread all over Dubai. Tamim cleverly explained and showed how the hit team members moved throughout the emirate, and how they entered and exited hotels, shopping centers, and the airport, in their effort to shadow al-Mabhouh, often changing clothes and disguises. According to Tamim, the core of the hit team was composed of 11 members, 3 Irish citizens, 6 Britons, 1 Frenchman, and 1 German. They arrived in Dubai aboard several flights from various European airports, some of them the night before the operations, others at the same time as al-Mabhouh, and a few of them a mere couple of hours before the operation. 648 hours of tape from the security cameras helped the Dubai police to reconstruct the events culminating with al-Mabhouh's death. The tapes and the photos taken by immigration authorities of all the passengers entering and exiting Dubai drove the Dubai police chief to the conclusion that not 11 but more than a score of Mossad agents participated in the operation. The official number he mentioned was 27, but Tamim later added a few more names to his list of suspects. Yet his conclusions raised several questions. Didn't the Mossad know that a network of security cameras was spread all over Dubai? According to Tamim, Israeli agents had visited Dubai several times to prepare the operation. Didn't they see the security cameras? And if they did, then perhaps a large part of the getting in and out of hotels, the change of clothes, wigs, and mustaches were nothing but a show for the cameras, and quite a few of the participants were not a part of the operation but were used only to mislead those who would examine the tapes later. And another point, the chief of police boasted that all the members of the hit team were photographed as they went through immigration. Didn't the Mossad know that was the procedure in Dubai? Didn't it make sure that the faces of its agents would be made up and disguised so that it would be impossible to recognize them afterward? A third question, how come the security cameras recorded every frame and every second of the secret agent's moves, except for 2, the entering and exiting of the hit detail in and out of al-Mabhouh's room? Chief Tamim revealed to the press that the members of the hit team used a phone number in Austria for some of their communications. By checking telephone records, Tamim could establish the identities of the foreigners who had used that number and were, apparently, members of the Mossad team. He also pointed out that several of the agents had paid their expenses in Dubai with Payoneer, MasterCard rechargeable credit cards, an Iowa-based company that had a research and development center in Israel. The most intriguing revelation in the investigation was that most of the hit team members had used real passports of Israeli citizens with dual nationality, and only very few used forged passports. Apparently, this was for a reason. The hit team was operating in an Arab country that is considered enemy territory. If the hit team members were captured, they could ask for the protection of the consuls of Great Britain, Germany, France, and Australia. If the consuls checked their computers, they would have found out that these people really existed, and they would have agreed to assist them. If, on the contrary, the hit team had used forged passports, the deception would have been exposed right away, and the agents would have been left without protection. After all this became known, Israel was harshly criticized by the nations whose passports had been used in Dubai. Great Britain, Australia, and Ireland expelled the Mossad representatives from their soil. Poland arrested a man called Yuri Brodsky at Warsaw's airport and extradited him to Germany. Brodsky was suspected of helping the agent Michael Bodenheimer to obtain a German passport under false pretenses. Brodsky was finally released by Germany after paying a fine of 60,000 euros. Bodenheimer was not found. Other countries expressed their indignation and fury. These reactions seemed laced with hypocrisy, as the use of forged or doctored passports is the standard rule of Secret Service activity. The nations now accusing Israel were and are using forged passports exactly the same way as the Mossad. Yet when a Russian spy network was uncovered in the United States in late 2010, nobody accused its members of using forged British and American papers. The reports in the world press created the impression that the Dubai operation was successful but had suffered from a grave mistake, the result of Israel's gross underestimation of Dubai and the Western nations they involved. That was a blow to Israel's international image, but not to its secret activity. The expelled Mossad envoys were soon replaced by others. The promises of the Dubai chief of police that the hit team members would be apprehended, because their identities were known all over the world, went unanswered. Not one Mossad agent of the Dubai team was identified by any police and arrested. Yet Dubai became a symbol of the new challenges facing any secret service in a changing world. The cloak and dagger era is definitely over. Security cameras, photographs and thumbprints at immigration, rapid checks of passports, DNA. All those require much more sophisticated means and methods from the spooks of this world when they set off on their dark, sinister missions. On April 7, 2011, an unidentified aircraft fired a missile on a passenger car on a road 15 kilometers south of Port Sudan, in the African state of Sudan. According to Israeli sources, the car was attacked by a Shadowy drone that can fly 4,000 kilometers without refueling and carry a load of a ton. The Shadowy is of a new generation of drones that Israel now uses in risky over-the-border missions, replacing aircraft piloted by men. The Israeli drones, some of the best in the world, carry out intelligence and attack missions all over the Middle East. One of the 2 people killed in the car attack in Sudan was said to be a Hamas leader. The Hamas used the Sudan Trail for smuggling weapons from Iran to Gaza. The weapons came by boat, were unloaded in Port Sudan, and proceeded in a convoy of vehicles via Egypt and the Sinai to Gaza, their drivers bribing their way through borders and checkposts. The Sudanese government immediately accused Israel of the coup. Israel had been designated as the culprit for another mysterious attack on a weapons convoy in January 2009. The trucks carrying weapons, missiles, and explosives had been destroyed, and 40 people manning the convoy had been killed. One of the men allegedly killed was the Hamas leader in charge of smuggling weapons from Iran to Gaza. Episode 21. From the Land of the Queen of Sheba. A group of Ethiopian children, black-skinned and clothed in white, entered the stage of the huge audience hall in Jerusalem. The children, blessed with a unique kind of beauty, watched the public with big, black eyes, filled with curiosity and pride. The famous Israeli composer Shlomo Gronik sat by the piano. Its first notes smoothly sailed over the hushed crowd, and a beautiful, yet chilling song surged from the children's choir. The moon is watching from above. On my back is a small bag of food. The desert beneath us has no end ahead, and my mother promises my little brothers, a little more, a little more. Lift up your legs, a last push. Toward Jerusalem. This was the journey song of poet Chaim Idissis, describing the epic journey of the Ethiopian Jews to the Promised Land, to Israel. The public cheered and applauded. Perhaps that was not Idissis's intention, and perhaps the enthusiastic crowds did not notice, but the children's song described the most moving, and the most terrible, chapter of the Ethiopian Jews' Aliyah to the land of their fathers. The moonlight stood fast, our bag of food was lost. And at nights bandits attacked with a knife and a sharp sword. In the desert, the blood of my mother the moon is my witness, and I promise my little brothers. A little bit more, a little more. The dream will be fulfilled. Soon we will arrive in the land of Israel. No other Israeli community ever suffered such appalling woes as the Ethiopian tribe on its way to Israel. It became a living legend. Its very existence seemed borrowed from a storybook. A Jewish tribe, cut off from the outside world, entrenched in the heart of Africa, they lived in the mountains and valleys of Ethiopia, the land of the Queen of Sheba. For thousands of years, this tribe stubbornly clung to its faith, a pure and innocent biblical religion. That quiet and shy tribe had been lost to history. Its leaders, the Kesim, venerable elders dressed in white robes, navigated their flock through the ancient rules of Judaism and the basic customs of modern life. Theirs was a tribe that at times lived in peace and serenity among its neighbors, and at other times was persecuted by cruel rulers. But it also had to face the ugly humiliation by rabbis and Jewish theological experts from the outside world, who had decided that the Ethiopian Jews, commonly called Falasha, were not really Jewish. Yet the Ethiopian Jews did not give up. And generation after generation, inspired by the tradition passed from father to son and from mother to daughter, they dreamed of the day when they would set off on their way to the land of Israel. Very few Ethiopians came to Israel in the first 30 years of its existence. Even during the reign of Emperor Haile Selassie, the Lion of Judea, who was Israel's close friend and ally, no serious effort was made to bring the Jews of Ethiopia to the Jewish state. Things started to change in 1973, when Israel's chief Rabbi Ovadia Yosef published an unequivocal halacha ruling that the Ethiopian Jews, who called themselves Beta Israel, were full-fledged Jews. 2 years later, the government of Israel decided to apply the law of return to the Ethiopian Jews. And when Mughniyeh became prime minister, in 1977, he called the director of the Mossad, General Yitzhak Hafi. "Bring me the Jews of Ethiopia," Begin said to the Ramsad. In the Mossad structure, a special unit, Bitzer, was charged with protecting Jews in enemy countries and with organizing immigration from those countries to Israel. Bitzer, later renamed Tsafarim, immediately got to work. Shortly after Begin's order to Haka, Dave Kimi landed in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia's capital. Dave was deputy director of the Mossad and the head of the Tevel, Department for Secret International Relations. He came to meet Ethiopia's ruler, Mengistu Haile Mariam. In those days, the exit gates of Ethiopia were locked for Jewish emigration. The nation was torn by a civil war, and Mengistu asked Israel for help against the rebels. Kimi refused to act against the rebels on Mengistu's behalf, but promised to supply him with weapons. And that on one condition, that Mengistu would allow Jewish emigration. "We demand," Kimi said, "that every Israeli Hercules aircraft that lands here, loaded with military equipment, take off loaded with Jews." Mengistu agreed. And the exodus of Jews from Ethiopia started. This arrangement lasted for 6 months, till it was destroyed in February 1978 by a slip of the tongue of then Minister of Foreign Affairs Moshe Dayan. Dayan had told a Swiss newspaper that Israel was supplying weapons to Mengistu's army. Some claimed Dayan had leaked that on purpose, being opposed to the arms deal with Mengistu's Marxist and pro-Soviet regime. Mengistu was furious. He could not publicly admit he maintained secret relations with Israel, and cancelled the agreement with the Mossad right away. The direct channel for Jewish immigration was now blocked, but Begin's order to Haka was still in force. The gates of Ethiopia were locked once again, but a letter that reached Mossad headquarters from Khartoum, the capital of Ethiopia's neighbor Sudan, suddenly offered another escape route for the Ethiopian Jews. The letter was signed by Farida Aklam, an Ethiopian Jew, a teacher, who had succeeded in crossing the border into Sudan. From Israel's point of view, Sudan was an enemy country. It was plagued with famine, drought, and tribal and religious wars. Thousands of refugees from various parts of the country, and from neighboring Ethiopia, gathered in squalid tent camps. Aklam posted several letters to Israel, and to relief organizations throughout the world, in a desperate effort to get urgent help for the emigration of the Ethiopian Jews. One of Aklam's letters landed in Mossad headquarters and attracted the attention of a senior official. "I am in Sudan," Aklam wrote, "send me a plane ticket." Instead of a plane ticket, the Mossad sent to Sudan one of its men, Danny Lamore, to meet Aklam. When they met, the two of them agreed that Aklam would try to find Jews in the refugee camps and keep Danny informed. In a few months, he, indeed, located 30 Jews, and the Mossad discreetly organized their immigration to Israel. A month later, Aklam was co-opted by the Mossad and charged with tracing Jews in Khartoum. He did not find any Jews there, though, and the Mossad envoy decided to return to Israel. Before leaving, Lamore instructed Aklam to leave for Israel as well. But Aklam wanted to stay and keep looking for Jews in other parts of Sudan. Lamore, however, was adamant. He ordered Aklam to put an end to his activities and return to Israel within a week. But Aklam disobeyed the order and started traveling from one town to another, from one refugee camp to another, hoping to find Jews there. He did not find even one Jew, but he knew well that if he returned to Israel now, this would put an end to the immigration of Ethiopian Jews via Sudan. He therefore composed a mendacious report, mentioning the names of many Jews whom he allegedly found in Sudan, faxed it to the Mossad, and announced that he was staying in Sudan to take care of them. The Jews whom Aklam included in his lists existed, indeed, but they were not in Sudan. They still lived in their villages in Ethiopia. Now Aklam started operating in Ethiopia as a lone wolf. He visited the villages and tried to convince the local Jews to immigrate to the land of Israel. The rumor that a secret route to Jerusalem had been found spread like wildfire. First a few men, then families, finally entire villages packed their meager belongings and set off. Thousands of people, including old men, women, and children, secretly left Ethiopia. They were inspired by a messianic dream, by the biblical promises of return to the land of milk and honey. They prepared food and water, crossed the border, and started an exhausting and dangerous journey in the desert. They marched at night, and during the day they hid in caves and crannies. Many fell sick and died. Babies died of dehydration in their mother's arms. A father lost his 4 children during the terrible journey. Some were bitten by snakes and scorpions, others died of infectious diseases. The water and the food they had taken with them were insufficient. Several groups were attacked by robbers that took all their belongings and often left behind heaps of corpses. Years later, the actress Meherita Barish, who had participated in the journey, described its terrible toll. Every morning, she said, the travelers counted the corpses of their friends. Sometimes there were 10 dead bodies spread in the sand, sometimes 15. There was not a family that had not lost at least one of their children. In the summer of 1981, Danny Lamore and his Mossad team were back in Sudan, operating under cover. They called themselves the Hafis, the initials of Hakka's force in Sudan. Their goal was to establish contact with the Ethiopian Jews throughout Sudan. But the surviving Jews met with other difficulties when trying to get in touch with the Mossad envoys. Even those who reached the refugee camps around Khartoum were heartbroken. They had to conceal their Jewish religion, and yet avoided eating the non-kosher food that the relief agencies were distributing to the refugees. Women were raped and young girls kidnapped by bullies and criminals who were the real rulers of the camps. A group of 100 girls was abducted and vanished. Their relatives who looked for them learned that they had been sold to Saudi Arabia, where about 120,000 women were held in bondage. Several Jews were identified as such by their neighbors in the camps. They were arrested and tortured by the Sudanese police. Many stayed in the refugee camps for months and even years till they were able to set off for Israel. The Ethiopian Jews paid a heavy price for their dream to enter the gates of Jerusalem. More than 4,000 Jews died during the various stages of their journey. Henry Gold, a Canadian Jew who worked as a volunteer in the camps in Sudan and Ethiopia, was deeply shocked by the situation of the Jews he found there, and harshly criticized the Israeli envoys for failing to carry out their mission properly. Yet the Mossad was looking for a secure way to get the Jews to Israel. The exodus from Sudan started by regular commercial flights, with forged passports, but the Mossad soon decided to take the refugees to Israel by sea, sending boats that would take them through the Red Sea and the Straits of Tiran, to the port of Eilat. As a cover, the Mossad established in Europe a company of tourism and travel. In order to operate in this area, one needs a cover story, said Mossad agent Yonatan Shifa, one of the operation leaders, for if you don't have a cover story after a week, they would ask you, "What are you doing here? You're a tourist? What is here to see?" The company leased an abandoned beach resort close to Port Sudan, called Aris, and signed an agreement with the Sudanese government for the development of maritime sports in the Red Sea. All the administrative dealings were entrusted to Yehuda Gil, who was regarded then as one of the best Mossad officers. Gil came to Khartoum, met with the regime officials, and with a lot of savvy explained, convinced, and bribed, till finally he got all the necessary permits and licenses for operating the Aris resort. The man charged with the setting up and the management of the resort was Yonatan Shifa, who had taken part in many Mossad operations. Eris was actually built as a village, with individual bungalows and a few public buildings. Several Mossad agents, carrying forged passports, were sent from Israel and became the resort's instructors and employees. They stuffed the resort store with diving equipment, scuba apparatus, masks, flippers, and snorkels. In the store was hidden a transceiver that was in permanent contact with Mossad headquarters. Emmanuel Alon, who had participated in many operations with Shifa, including the rescue of the Syrian virgins, got a call from Yonatan. He told me, "I need you for something special. This time it is an operation without killing, something special, something humane. I am talking to you, and I am getting so emotional. I want to establish a resort village in Sudan." The village was open to the public, and its posters soon sprouted on the walls of European travel agencies. Many tourists spent their vacation in Eris, and at least from their point of view, the resort was a success. During the day, they dived, swam, and enjoyed the Red Sea beach. But they did not know that almost every night the Mossad agents set off from the village to bring over Jews from the refugee camps. The diving instructors invented a cover story for the local employees of the resort, who were Sudanese. They told the locals that they were going to spend the night with the Swedish nurses of the Red Cross hospital in the town of Kassala. When the merry departures reached a dubious frequency, the local employees started suspecting that something fishy was going on there, but as long as they got their generous salaries, they preferred to look the other way. The nightly journeys were carried out with 4 old trucks. The Mossad agents, under the command of Danny Lamore, drove to the vicinity of the camps. The young members of a secret Ethiopian organization, the committee, would gather groups of Jews and take them to the trucks. But that was not easy. The Israelis were running many dangers. David Ben-Uzziel, one of the operation leaders, deemed the approach to the camps as the most dangerous part of the mission. "We were very close to the camps," he said. "We could be caught and had to finish this part as soon as possible." While the committee was trying to locate the Jews in the refugee camps, there were many who refrained from identifying themselves, for fear of the Sudanese police. The Jews from the mountain villages in Ethiopia had never seen a white man before. They refused to believe that the Israelis were Jews who came to save them, for they did not know that there were also white Jews. Only when Danny Lamore came to pray with them did they start believing he was a Jew, a strange one, praying in an unusual way, but a Jew all the same. Fearing a leak, the Mossad agents did not warn the Jews beforehand. The committee people told them to be ready to leave at any moment, and when they were contacted, they had to leave everything and go. And so, night after night, groups of Jews sneaked out of the camps and surreptitiously walked to the meeting point in a small ravine close by, where the Mossad agents were waiting. The 4-truck convoy would travel hundreds of kilometers to the Red Sea coast. En route, they had to go through army and police checkpoints. Danny would bribe the guards, and the trucks would be allowed to continue. At the meeting point on the coast, the Israeli Navy would be waiting. A Navy boat would be moored at some distance, and the naval commandos came to the coast in rubber dinghies to collect the Jews and take them aboard the mothership. The main boat that came every week to the Sudanese coast was Bat Galim. None of the Mossad agents and the naval commandos would ever forget the emotional meeting with their Ethiopian brethren and their dramatic departure toward Israel. Mossad agent David Ben-Uzziel described the transfer of the Jews to the boats in a handheld tape recorder. "The sea is stormy," he said. "We are carrying each one of our brothers in our arms so nobody would drown. The emotions of our men here run very high. Some say the sights remind them of their parents, who came to Israel as illegal immigrants. They were on the verge of bursting into tears when they saw our brothers enter the ship. They came in complete silence," added Gadi Kroll, the commander of the naval force. "Old men, women, babies in arms. We immediately sailed on the stormy seas. They sat down and didn't utter a word. The Navy boats took them to Eilat. One day, the Canadian Jewish volunteer Henry Gold came to the resort village. He was exhausted from the hard work at the refugee camps, and some friends talked him into taking a couple of days off, to sun, swim, and dive. He had no idea of the secret activities taking place in and around Aris. But when he toured the village, he felt something was very strange here. He had the impression he was surrounded by Mossad agents. The staff seemed very weird. They had a strange accent. One woman introduced herself as Swiss, but she didn't have a Swiss accent, and the Iranian didn't have an Iranian accent. At dinner, they put on the tables a very thinly chopped salad. I have been in many places all over the world, but such a salad is served only in Israel. The following morning, Gold did not hesitate anymore and turned to the diving instructor, to ask in Hebrew, "Tell me, what are you people doing here?" The guy, amazed, blushed and collapsed on a chair. Finally, he asked Gold, also in Hebrew, "Who are you?" The very same day, a senior Mossad officer arrived and took Gold aside. Gold confronted him angrily about the treatment of the Jews in the refugee camps. In one of the operations, in March 1982, while several boats were carrying the Ethiopians to the ship, in complete darkness, a dinghy with 4 Mossad agents got stuck among some rocks by the beach. At that moment, a squad of Sudanese soldiers armed with AK-47 rifles suddenly emerged on the beach and aimed their weapons at the tiny boat. Danny Lamore pulled himself together, hurled himself on the soldiers, and yelled in English at their commander, "Are you out of your mind? Are you going to fire on tourists?" He kept shouting about the tourists who came to dive in this resort, about Aris's contribution to the tourist trade in Sudan, then threatened to lodge a complaint against the squad commander in Khartoum. The officer, stunned, apologized and explained he had assumed that the people in the boat were smugglers. He ordered his soldiers to leave the place at once. The Mossad agents were safe, but the departures by sea apparently could not continue. A new way had to be found to transport the Jews to Israel. One morning, the tourists in Aris woke up to find that the entire foreign staff had vanished, except for some locals who had stayed behind to prepare breakfast for the guests. The previous night, the Mossad agents had left the village. They left letters of apology saying that the resort was closed because of budgetary difficulties. The tourists were to get their money back upon return to their countries. That was done, and all the divers were reimbursed in the coming weeks. After long discussions at Mossad headquarters, the Ramsad decided that the next transports would be carried out by air, with Rhinos, Hercules C-130 transport aircraft of the Israeli Air Force. It was a risky gamble, implying the penetration into Sudan's airspace and the repeated landing of Israeli soldiers on the territory of an enemy country. But Israel had no choice. The Ethiopian Jews had to be rescued. In May 1982, the Mossad agents returned to Sudan. Their first mission was to locate possible landing areas south of Port Sudan. They found an abandoned British airfield and repaired its runway, making it suitable for the landing of the heavy Rhinos. The first group of Jews was brought from the meeting point to the airfield. Torches were used to light up the landing strip. But when the enormous Air Force Rhino landed, the Ethiopian Jews were scared to death. The huge metal bird that they saw for the first time in their lives landed in a roar of engines, rising clouds of dust, and seemed to head straight at them. Many ran away and agreed to come back only after exhausting efforts of persuasion by the Mossad people. Others stubbornly refused to enter the belly of the steel monster. The aircraft that was supposed to depart immediately finally took off with an hour delay, carrying 213 Jews. The agents got a telegram of congratulations from headquarters, but they learned an important lesson. In the future, the trucks would wait until the Rhino landed and extended its ramp, and then they would drive to the very tail of the aircraft, so that the Jews would get right into the gaping belly of the plane. That was a success, but it did not last long. The Sudanese authorities discovered the strange traffic at the abandoned airstrip, and the Mossad agents had to find another landing area. Soon they found another strip, 46 kilometers southwest of Port Sudan. This time, the Mossad decided to carry out a large rescue operation of 7 Hercules flights, each flight to carry 200 Jews. Operation Brothers took place under the personal command of the Ramsad, Haka, and the commander of the Paratrooper Corps, General Amos Yaron. In the following 2 years, from mid-1982 to mid-1984, it brought to Israel 1,500 Ethiopian Jews. That successful operation almost ended in failure. An informer of the Sudanese security forces pinpointed the contact man of the Mossad in the refugee camps. Ada Solomon, an Ethiopian Jew, was arrested and tortured for 42 days by the Sudanese. They wanted to know the names of his handlers, and the location of the meeting places with the Mossad agents. But Solomon did not break down and did not reveal the secret. At the end of 1984, the situation in the camps worsened. The famine and the infectious diseases caused many deaths among the Ethiopians. A civil war raged in Sudan, and threatened the regime of the nation's dictator, Jafar Naimiri. His survival now depended on an urgent grant of financial aid and food supplies by the United States. Israel asked Washington to help Sudan if it allowed the airlift to Israel to continue. The administration agreed, and the U.S. ambassador in Khartoum was instructed to negotiate along those lines. The result was a compromise. The Jews would not be flown to Israel directly but via a third country. Israel would not be involved in the operation. The compensation to Sudan would be in the form of food and fuel shipments. The U.S. Embassy in Khartoum informed Washington that the Jews can be evacuated from Sudan in 5 or 6 weeks. That's how Operation Moses was born. In the meantime, Haka had been replaced as Ramsad by his deputy, Nahum Admoni, who had distinguished himself in the previous years by his energetic efforts to organize the immigration of the Ethiopian Jews. Admoni now authorized his men to fly the Jews via Belgium. A Jewish businessman who owned a small air charter company agreed to help the operation with his Boeing airliners. And so, on November 18, 1984, at 1:20 a.m., the first Belgian aircraft landed in Sudan. 250 starving, exhausted, and badly scared refugees got on the plane. But the Belgian pilot refused to take off, because the plane was equipped with only 210 oxygen masks, not enough for 250 passengers. The Mossad agent in charge took him aside and whispered, quietly but firmly, "Please, make the selection yourself and decide who will live and who will die." He then added, not so quietly, "If you don't get in the cockpit and start the engines, I'll throw you out of the plane and put another pilot in your seat." That was a very persuasive argument. The pilot got in the cockpit, and at 2:40 a.m., the first flight of Operation Moses took off for Israel, with a stopover in Brussels. During the next 47 days, the Boeings carried out 36 secret flights and brought over 7,800 Ethiopian Jews. In Israel, the military censorship made desperate efforts to prevent any leakage of information about the operation. Their efforts succeeded until the Jewish Agency chairman, Ari Dolzin, published a statement saying that one of the Jewish tribes is about to return to our homeland. In the wake of this communique, the New York Jewish press published the details of the operation, followed by the Los Angeles Times. 3 days later, Prime Minister Shimon Peres told the Knesset, "The government of Israel acted, and will keep acting, to the limit of its powers and even beyond, to continue the operation until the last Ethiopian Jew reached his homeland." The very same day, the Sudanese canceled the flights and the operation was stopped. The Sudanese were infuriated, not by the articles in the press but by the speech of the Israeli Prime Minister, who confirmed the story. If the Israelis had kept quiet for another month, observed a U.S. official in Washington, it would have been possible to save all the Jews of Ethiopia. Vice President George H.W. Bush was deeply impressed by Operation Moses and Israel's efforts to bring over the Ethiopians despite great risks. He decided to act. A few weeks after the cancellation of Operation Moses, 7 Hercules aircraft of the U.S. Air Force landed in the Sudanese airfield at Al-Qadarif. They carried aboard several CIA agents. The American task force launched Operation Queen of Sheba, and flew the 500 Ethiopian Jews remaining in Sudan directly to the Israeli Air Force Base at Mitzpe Ramon, in the Negev. 2 months later, Jafar Nimiri was deposed by a junta of army officers. Libyan intelligence officers rushed to Sudan in order to find the Mossad agents who were still in Khartoum. The last 3 remaining agents were discovered by the Libyans and at the last moment were able to escape to the home of a CIA agent. The American hid them in his house and later flew them, hidden in crates, to the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. David Mollad, who had been one of the senior Mossad officers in Sudan, slipped quietly out of the country. The rescue of the Ethiopian Jews was to be one of his last operations before his retirement from the Mossad. In Operations Moses and Queen of Sheba, the US-Israeli cooperation had been perfect, almost idyllic. Unfortunately, shortly after these events, the Pollard affair exploded in Washington. A Jewish employee of the U.S. intelligence community, Jonathan Pollard, was arrested for spying on behalf of Israel. The U.S. government was stunned and furious. The heads of the CIA felt betrayed by the ally whom they had helped and who, in return, had spied on them. The Israeli government profusely apologized and returned the documents stolen by Pollard to the United States. But the intelligence relations between Jerusalem and Washington had suffered a serious blow. One of Pollard's handlers turned out to be none other than Rafi Eitan, the legendary Mossad agent, who now headed an obscure intelligence organization in the Ministry of Defense. The organization, LACM, the Bureau for Scientific Relations, was disbanded right away, and judicial proceedings against Eitan were initiated in Washington. To this very day, he cannot enter the United States for fear of being arrested. Operation Moses was severely criticized by many Ethiopian Jews, as it took the lives of about 4,000 people. In the Mossad, too, the officers of Caesarea, headed at that time by Shabtai Shavit, strongly disapproved of the planning and execution of the operation by the Bitzer department. Shavit and his men claimed that Bitzer was a marginal department that was not equipped to undertake an operation of such magnitude as Moses. The Bitzer people insisted that the operation succeeded precisely because of its spontaneous and improvised character. They also pointed out that they had recruited some of the best Mossad agents for carrying out the various stages of Moses. The infighting could not change the fact that thousands of Jews had returned to the land of Israel. And yet, even after the completion of Operation Moses and Operation Queen of Sheba, thousands of Jews remained in Ethiopia. They also wanted to immigrate to Israel, but the gates were locked. Israel felt it was imperative to bring them over, for ideological and Zionist considerations, but also for a humane reason. Many families had been split and torn, children had arrived in Israel without their parents, parents without their children, husbands without their wives. This separation caused terrible absorption problems, and many personal tragedies, like suicides of young people who could not cope with the new reality without the support of their families. The Jewish agency emissaries transferred thousands of Jews to camps around the capital Addis Ababa, and the Ethiopian Jews kept praying for a miracle that would take them to the land of Israel. And the miracle happened. 6 years after Operation Moses, in May 1991, Operation Solomon was launched. It took place at the height of the civil war, as the rebels against the reigning military junta approached Addis Ababa from all sides. The operation was made possible by a last-minute agreement, brokered by the United States, between the government of Israel and the beleaguered ruler Mengistu in the last days before his collapse. The agreement was negotiated thanks to the secret activity of Yuri Lubrani, one of Israel's mystery men, who had been special envoy to Iran and Lebanon. He had undertaken the mission at the request of Prime Minister Yitzhak Shamir. Israel agreed to pay Ethiopia $35 million for the immigration of the Jews, while the United States promised some of the major figures in Mengistu's government political asylum in America. Simultaneously, an understanding was reached with the rebel leaders that they would accept a truce in the fighting for a limited time while Israel carried out its operation. It took 36 hours, and the operation was over. The IDF was charged with executing Operation Solomon. The Deputy Chief of Staff, General Amnon Lipkin-Shahak, took over command of the action. At his orders, Israel sent to Addis Ababa everything that could fly. The El Airline sent to Ethiopia 30 airliners. The Air Force sent many of its aircraft. Elite squads of Shaldag, Kingfisher, commandos were brought to Addis Ababa. At their sides were hundreds of infantry soldiers and paratroopers of Ethiopian origin, who had immigrated to Israel as children a few years ago. They deployed at the confines of the airport and led the Jews into the plains. In 34 hours, 14,400 Jews were brought to the airport. With lightning speed, they boarded the aircraft and took off for Israel. A world record was broken during the operation. An Boeing 747 took on board 1,087 immigrants, but when it landed, it carried 1,088 people. A baby had been born during the flight. At the sight of the young Ethiopian soldiers who had arrived from Israel to rescue their brothers, tremendous emotions swept the immigrants. Even the tough Ethiopian paratroopers, in their green IDF uniforms, red berets, and jumping boots, burst into tears. Today, more than 20 years after Operation Solomon, there still are many Jews in Ethiopia, and efforts are made to bring them over to Israel. But the absorption of the Ethiopians in the Israeli society has not been easy, often because of the gap between a rural African community and a modern Western nation, but also because of blunt discrimination or ugly claims by some religious leaders that the Ethiopians are not real Jews. As the last stanza of The Journey Song says, "In the moon, the image of my mother looks at me, mother, don't disappear. If only she were by my side. She would be able to convince them that I am a Jew." Epilogue: War with Iran? Entebbe Airport, Uganda, July 4, 1976. In the black of night, 4 Israeli Hercules aircraft, undetected by Ugandan radar, surreptitiously land at Entebbe Airport. They have flown a distance of 2,500 miles from their base in Israel, carrying the Sayeret Matkal Commando and several other elite army units. A week before, Arab and German terrorists hijacked an Air France airliner on its way from Tel Aviv to Paris, and landed it in Entebbe. Protected and supported by Uganda's dictator, General Idi Amin, the terrorists hold 95 Israeli civilians hostage. Israel decides to launch a daring operation to the heart of Africa, to rescue the hostages. Minutes after the landing, the Israeli commandos spread throughout the airport. Yoni Netanyahu, commander of Sayeret Matkal, leads his men in an assault on the terminal where the hostages are held. In the intense firefight that erupts, Yoni suddenly collapses, hit by a bullet. Another Sayeret officer, Captain Tamir Pardo, bends over his fallen commander, switches his mic on, and calls his comrades. "Yoni has been hit," he says. "Muki, take over." Yoni's deputy, Muki Betzer, assumes command and pursues the mission. Minutes later, the battle is over. The terrorists are killed, the hostages rescued, and the heavy Hercules planes take off, on their way back to Israel. The rescue of the hostages, so far away from home, is about to become legend. But it has exacted a price. 3 of the hostages have died in the firefight. As has one soldier, Lieutenant Colonel Yoni Netanyahu, brother of future Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The entire Israeli nation mourns Yoni's death. That night, Tamir Pardo, the Sayeret communications officer, knocks on the door of the Netanyahu family in Jerusalem. He has been sent to inform them about the circumstances of Yoni's death. A warm relationship will sprout between Netanyahu's family and Tamir Pardo, who was at Yoni's side in his last moments. 35 years later, 57-year-old Tamir Pardo is appointed Ramsad, replacing Mayor Dagon. Born in Tel Aviv to a Jewish family of Turkish and Serbian origin, 18-year-old Tamir had volunteered for the paratroopers, graduated from the Officers' Academy, and served in the Sayeret Matkal and at Shaldag, Kingfisher, commando units. For years after Entebbe, he joined the Mossad, took part in several unnamed operations, and was awarded the Israel Security Prize 3 times. In 1998 he was appointed chairman of the Mossad inquiry board that investigated Khaled Mashal's flawed assassination attempt in Amman. Soon after, he became the head of Neviath, the Mossad department charged with electronic collection of intelligence in foreign countries. He specialized in new technologies and creative planning. In 2002, when Dagon was appointed Ramsad, Pardo became one of his 2 deputies, and for the next 4 years headed the Mossad operations staff, but in 2006 he spent a year with the IDF as an army general, advising the general staff on special operations. He was said to have planned several daring missions during the Second Lebanon War. Pardo was called back to Dagon's side in 2007. He expected to be appointed Ramsad when Dagon's tenure came to an end in 2009, but the cabinet, impressed by Dagon's achievements, extended his service for another year. Pardo, disappointed, resigned from the Mossad and went into business with a medical services company. That did not last long. On November 29, 2010, Prime Minister Netanyahu appointed him the next Ramsad, and he assumed his functions in January 2011. In many ways, Pardo followed the footsteps of his predecessor. The ruthless covert war against Iran continued. In November and December 2011, several explosions rocked a military base where Shahab missiles were being tested, and a Isfahan suburb where the uranium gas, separated in the centrifuge cascades, was again converted to solid matter. Then another scientist, Dr. Mostafa Ahmadi-Roshan, the deputy director of the Natanz underground facility, was killed while driving his car in the streets of Tehran. The modus operandi was similar to others used in several past assassinations. Iran accused Israel of the attacks and swore revenge. For the first time, the Iranian secret services tried to carry out several coups against Israeli targets in Asia. A bombing of a car in New Delhi wounded an Israeli diplomat's wife. A similar attempt in Tbilisi, Georgia, failed. Several explosions went off in Bangkok, Thailand, one of which wounded the perpetrator, an Iranian national. The Egyptian secret services foiled a plot by Iranian agents to blow up an Israeli ship sailing through the Suez Canal. The covert war between Israel and Iran was now coming into the open. Police investigators in New Delhi, Bangkok, and Cairo pointed a finger at Iran's secret services. The world press described in detail the rather clumsy attempts by Iranian spooks to attack Israeli targets abroad. Coming into the open were also new details about the Israeli operations inside Iran. Western sources claimed that the Mossad had established operational bases in Azerbaijan and Kurdistan, right on the Iranian border. They served as the training grounds and dispatch for agents inside Iranian territory. The same sources claimed that many of the Mossad agents operating inside Iran were actually members of the MEK opposition, Iranian Muslims who could blend into the local population better than any Israeli officer. Quite a few MEK militants had been trained in secret facilities in Israel, and even rehearsed some of the operations on specially built models, like a Tehran street, where they were to ambush an Iranian nuclear scientist's car or plant a bomb near his home. In other cases, Iranian dissidents were approached by different means. Several CIA memos even maintained that Mossad officers carried out false flag recruiting missions. The Israelis, allegedly posing as CIA agents, recruited militants of the Pakistani terrorist organization Jandala and sent them on sabotage and assassination missions inside Iran. According to the CIA memos, the Israelis posed as American intelligence officers in order to overcome the devout Muslims' objection to serving the Jewish state. In the spring of 2012, worried international observers claimed that the Iranian nuclear project was close to completion, and sources in the International Atomic Energy Agency even declared that Iran has produced 109 kilograms of enriched uranium, enough to assemble 4 atomic bombs. If Israel decided to deal a major blow to the Iranian project by launching an all-out attack against its nuclear centers, the covert war would give way to an open one. According to the world press and quite a few talkative spokesmen, Israel was not alone in its consideration of a military option. In Jerusalem and Washington, official sources confirmed that Israel and the United States were acting together, but disagreed on a major point: when would Iran have to be stopped by all means necessary, military or other? The American services claimed that this would be the moment when the enrichment of uranium by Iran reached 80%, a crucial stage in the development of their nuclear capability. Uranium enriched to that level could be very quickly upgraded to 97%, the degree needed for the assembly of an atomic bomb. Israel's timetable was different, based on reports from the ground and satellite detection. The Mossad had discovered that Iran was engaged in a chaotic race against time, building a large number of underground facilities buried at a depth of 80 meters or more. They were transferring all their fissile materials and their secret labs underground. Intelligence reports obtained by the Mossad, with the help of the MEK resistance organization, claimed that Iran had built a new underground facility close to Fordo. In the huge halls of the new facility, the Iranians planned to install 3,000 new centrifuges, far faster and more sophisticated than the equipment now in service. In that facility, the Iranians could feed the centrifuges uranium enriched up to 3.5% and keep enriching it till it was ready for use. Israel was convinced that this doomsday cave, like many other bases and labs, had to be destroyed before the centrifuges were installed, becoming fully protected against an aerial attack. When they reached the critical stage of enrichment, the Israeli envoys told the Americans, it will be too late to hit them. They will have entered an immune area, where no bombings will be able to destroy their project. The time to act is now, in the spring of 2012. Washington was not convinced and wanted to try a campaign of harsh sanctions. Israel did not believe the sanctions would stop Iran. At a summit meeting in Washington in early spring 2012, President Obama and Prime Minister Netanyahu praised the firm strategic alliance between the two nations but could not agree on a way forward against the Iranian nuclear project. The Mossad reports still indicated that Tehran was relentlessly pursuing atomic power. At the same time, Iranian leaders relentlessly threatened Israel with total annihilation. The very thought of the danger that a fanatic, nuclear Iran represented for Israel and the world reminded the Israelis of the old Talmudic adage, if someone comes to kill you, rise up and kill him first. Israel felt that once again it was standing alone. And, as in 1948, the year of its creation, and in 1967, on the eve of the Six-Day War, Israel again faces the most fateful decision of its existence. This is the last parts of the Mossad series. Did you enjoy learning something new today? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more fascinating knowledge. Your support helps us continue bringing you engaging content. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.